and dying in your beds many years from now, would you be willing to trade all the days from this day to that for one chance, just one chance, to come back here and tell our enemies that they may take our lives, but they'll never take our freedom?
Welcome to Anti-Tyranny News Radio here on UCY.tv. Thank you for joining me this evening. Oh, a lot of stuff going on. How about those Republicans? You know, them taking so many seats this last election. Oh, you know, all this hope. Yeah, we'll get into that when it comes to Obamacare. But I do want to start off the first hour with the whole the militarization of the police. You know, the whole Eric Garner case. I really don't even want to talk about the Michael Brown case because that really is. I think the outrage came mainly from provocateurs that were spreading misinformation. That was just being used. But the Eric Garner, even though I think it does have a level of infiltration when it comes to the protesting and all that, I think there's a lot more people united. Definitely out in New York where the police are extremely corrupt, and that's kind of a known thing. It's been known for a long time. They keep saying that, you know, they are cleaning up the corruption, and it doesn't ever seem to happen. We always tend to see New York NYPD as being a corrupt police force. You had the one video of the cop shooting at the guy in a crowd. We've seen how they handled the Occupy protests. We see how they're handling the Eric Garner protest, and the you know, stop and frisk. They kind of present themselves as corrupt people. So that's the, you know, conclusion you're going to come to. First, I want to play this clip here from We Are Change. Eric Garner, the real issue is the war against us. And I'm going to talk about this clip here a little bit after, and got one more clip I want to play over the militarization of the police force, and then I'll open up the phone lines for a little bit before we move on to the next topic. But let's go ahead and cue this one up here.
Many people are saying that a new civil rights movement was born during the crescendo moment of the non-indictment of the police officer who killed Eric Garner. And they're right. But sadly, the debate around this issue is being dominated by complete and utter idiots, like the slick-haired FBI snitch, race-baiting turtle-head Al Sharpton, and of course the warmongering, fake-toothed, racist, police state enthusiast demon Rudolph Giuliani. It seems like in the mainstream media, these two idiots are getting the most amount of play, the most amount of attention with this very serious issue, and of course they muddy the issue. So when Rudolph Giuliani says something really stupid, the people on the left have to respond and not deal with the issue. The same thing when Al Sharpton opens his mouth, he says something stupid, the people on the right respond, and of course they don't deal with the real issues. They're making it a black and white issue. It's not. It's not a black and white issue. It's not just predominantly a race issue. It has come to the point where the families of the victims of this police state that we're living under are coming out and saying themselves, like Eric Gardner's wife, who said her husband was targeted for selling illegal cigarettes, not his race. Eric Gardner's daughter came out and said this is not a black and white issue. Even the family of Akai Gurley, the young man who was murdered by the NYPD, who did not have a weapon on him, just recently, his mother and his aunt actually banned Al Sharpton from the funeral and said he has no right to speak from the family. Now, of course, we know race is an issue in this country. It's something very important. But there's other issues that are not being touched at all. And first of all, why is Rudolph Giuliani, the man who created the police state in New York City, even have a voice in this matter? If you know Rudolph Giuliani, if you lived in New York City when Giuliani was mayor, you could see the police state that he has set up with his broken windows theory. I mean, just even the murder of Amner Louima, Abdul Diallo, Patrick Dorsman, and other people who were murdered here, who were innocent people that he protected. The amount of civil rights violations that happened in New York City under Rudolph Giuliani, he cost the city millions of dollars in lawsuits against people's civil rights here. And yet he's getting play and attention? I'm not even going to get started on Al Sharpton. But anyway, you see this divide and conquer. You see this muddying of the issues. You see these heretics getting more attention than anybody else, muddying the waters. You see the families come out and say, wait, hold on. Let's actually talk about this issue. Now, again, I just want to reiterate, race is an issue. African-American communities are dealing with the brunt of the police state, and so is everybody else. But the police state and the war against the people, I think, is a very important factor that's not being covered by the mainstream media outlets. You see some talk about it in the alternative media, if people don't take a black and white side. Now, I could take either side. I could take the right side of this movement. I could talk to the left side in this movement. I could probably get a bigger audience by just picking one side and sticking to it and guarding that issue. But I won't, because this issue is not black and white. It's gray. It's a very confusing issue with many different aspects to it that is very hard to grasp in one single talking point, and it's virtually impossible to get into without being biased in one shape or another. But one thing that is clear to me personally is the war against the people that's being waged because of this movement. In Chicago, during the Eric Gardner protests, the Chicago Police Department were using the Stingray cell phone interceptors. They are spying on protesters at this rally. They're using this vehicle, which, of course, many police departments have because of the federal programs and Pentagon programs that are giving to them, and the new authorities that are giving to them under Barack Obama's NSA program. They're driving around vehicles like this and intercepting protests' communications. This is leaked audio from a police scanner, and look what they were talking about.
One of the girls is kind of wrong here. It's been her phone a lot. You guys picking up any information where to go possibly? Yeah, we're keeping an eye on it. We'll let you know if we hear anything.
Again, those are police officers talking with the Fusion Center about the organizer on her cell phone, and the police officers are demanding to know where she is going to be. And of course, we see this vehicle that everyone's posting pictures about with this huge antenna on top that intercepts cell phone communications, illegally violating the Fourth Amendment. This is happening while these idiots get the main attention. Another thing that's happening here in New York City, and also there's a lawsuit against the Chicago Police Department now because of these phone intercepts. That's one positive story out here. Of course, it's covered by the local media. But another thing that has been happening here is that the New York City Police Department, during these protests, are using military-grade sonic weapons, LRADs. They were used against me in Pittsburgh during the G20 protests, and they are a serious weapon to be dealt with. It is a weapon that was first used in Iraq against so-called insurgents. It's a weapon that has been used by the U.S. military in the war of terror in foreign combat zones. And now they're using it here in New York City. We actually got pictures of the LRAD during my coverage of the protest. But here you see my friend James capture video of it actually in use, dispersing protests in New York City. That high-pitched sound you hear is a laser sound wave weapon used against protesters that makes people run away from certain locations. That the sound is so vicious. When it was being used against me, even when I closed my ears, even when I had earplugs in, the sound was penetrating my brain and hurting my brain. It's something that you have to run away from to escape. Again, my friend James shoots live videos of everything that happens during the Eric Garner protest here in New York City. Definitely follow him at James FT Internet. We also have a lot of coverage on our YouTube channel from all the protests that have been happening here. And of course, police also are firing tear gas at protesters in California. And of course, mainstream media violence breaks out in California. No. How about protesters react to police violence and for some reason decide to vandalize their community? I think that's more of a fair headline, but of course that doesn't get hits. Of course the mainstream media is not interested in showing how protesters are reacting from violent police officers and how they use vandalism as a way to get their aggression out. I'm not saying either side is right or wrong in this situation. Two wrongs do not make a right. But a lot of times what I've seen from protests, from covering protests for over 12 years now, a lot of times the police instigate a situation, the protesters react. A lot of times that includes vandalism in the reaction. I'm not saying it's right in any way, shape, or form, but that's the situation that breaks down. And CNN, of course, is talking about violence breaking out protests. No. How about you talk about the real issues? CNN also had another stupid, ridiculous headline today. What is a chokehold? They actually had a mixed martial arts instructor chokehold a CNN instructor. I can't say I didn't enjoy watching a CNN reporter getting choked, but they're doing a demonstration. This is their news. This is their investigative reporting team showing you what a chokehold is. They think you're idiots. They're not talking about the Stingray. They're not talking about the LRAD. They're not talking about the tear gas being used against the people, the war against the people being waged on by the police state. Now, of course, Obama and de Blasio, they're coming out and saying, you know, we'll placate you guys. We'll have body cameras. Now, you got to ask yourself, body cameras could be turned off by police officers, number one. Number two, we had full footage in HD what happened to Eric Garner, and that didn't change a damn situation. So they're trying to placate protesters. Meanwhile, police departments, with the authorization of the federal authorities to spy and use these military-grade weapons against you, are waging a war against you, while idiots like this dominate the debate. Of course, this guy. Don't get me started on them. But again, with all this happening, let's put things in perspective. Let's connect the dots here. I've been covering the protests here every day in New York City. Don't forget to get more updates and photos about what's happening here on twitter.com/LukeWeAreChange. We're going to have more videos breaking down the situation on this YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe. You'll get news here that you won't get anywhere else. And that's only because we got our eyes and ears on the ground here with what actually is happening. Don't be divided and conquered. The war is against the people. Don't be divided and conquered and fall for their traps and their muddying of the waters. Meanwhile, the real war is being waged against anybody resisting the system. I hope you enjoyed this.
That was We Are Changed, Luke Radowski. We Are Changed on YouTube, wearechange.org. And this really highlights how the mainstream media is covering the protests, they go, well, you know, Eric Garner. Well, no, not Eric Garner. This really does go beyond, and you know, this goes back to what I talked about during the Ferguson riots. And when you allow the law enforcement, the police officers, to become this corrupt of a law enforcement, and this is why we always try to say, well, you know, if you're going to truly be a good cop, you have to call out the corruption within. You have to break that brotherhood, because it's not about a brotherhood. I'm a big family person. You know, I'm real close with my family. We've always been a close family. But if a relative is doing something stupid, that doesn't mean I stop loving them or, you know, whatnot, but I'm not going to be a part of it. There's a certain level of, yes, you know, we have this connection, but bad is bad, good is good, and you know, when you decide that you are going to be corrupt in what you do, I think that if you're a good cop, you will call that out, and even when the consequences of that might be losing your job or being harassed, if you have to move, you have to move, but you have to be the one that stands for what's right. And that's the problem. We've had that brotherhood with the law enforcement. So you have cops that are there trying to do what's good. They're not there to harass people. They really just want to fight the real criminals out there, the murderers and rapists, and they're not there because of the drug war or the cushy job, but because of their lack of standing their ground to, you know, what's right when it comes to other law enforcement. You are allowing the corruption to exist, therefore you're going to be grouped in with that corruption. So when society has dealt with cops that have used excessive force, that have been corrupt, that have killed innocent people, that's what this is about. And then when your response is to bring out militarized vehicles and LRADs and spy on communications driving around, do you think that's going to better the outcome for you? Do you think that's going to be productive and keeping yourself safe as a law enforcement? When the community finally has had enough, when those LRADs are no longer holding them back, that's when you're going to see a civil war. So if there are so-called good cops, you better start standing up. And it seems like what's going on is a reflection of society getting fed up. And I don't support any of the violent acts, but I do support the people out there peacefully protesting. And when they don't give up and they're tired of the corruption and they no longer stand down to your, you know, LRADs, and that civil war starts breaking out, you know, there might be a point where the police are basically given a decision to step down or, you know, fire upon citizens. And when you see police and military and feds being, you know, asked, would you fire on American citizens, you know, what kind of people do we have in those organizations? Are we going to have people that are willing to fire on American citizens? They're not afraid to fire tear gas, tasers. They have already been caught shooting innocent people. No-knock raids, flashbanging a child in the crib, and going, "Oops, we're sorry, but we're not paying for it." Yeah, we seem to just be headed for hell in a handbasket. So, another thing that comes down to is what is behind the police militarization. We kind of have to really look to see what's behind that. I do have a clip here. Truth in Media, the root of police militarization. And we know a lot of it is, from the feds. So we know that it's coming from the government. So I'm going to play this clip here. Make sure I don't have a commercial I have to skip. If it's Ben Swan, I'll just let it play.
The militarization of America's police forces has captured the nation's attention, largely because of Ferguson, Missouri. But what media has not told you is how police forces got militarized in the first place. And why militarization is about a lot more than just military equipment. The first step toward truth is to be informed. They were images that captured the attention of the entire nation. Police responding to protests in Ferguson, Missouri, after an unarmed black teen was shot to death in the middle of the day.
Disperse the area immediately. You are in violation of the state-imposed curfew.
Michael Brown's death triggered looting and protests.
You are subject to arrest and these continued actions.
Now, what stunned the nation was how police responded to those protests. Not like a police force, but like a military unit. Armored vehicles, flash grenades. For millions of Americans, this was a stunning sight on American streets. Now, we've been warning people about the militarization of police forces for well over a year before Ferguson happened. But the rest of the media acted like they had no idea, and maybe they didn't. Here's what apparently they didn't know. It's called the 1033 program, or the Department of Defense Excess Property Program. In short, it is a federal program that provides surplus DoD military equipment to state and local civilian law enforcement agencies for use in counter-narcotics and counter-terrorism operations, and to enhance officer safety. So what kind of equipment are we talking about here? Well, first of all, it's not all weaponry.
Yeah, and that's one reason I think a lot of people come to me and say, well, don't you think we should ban the 1033 program? And I'm actually against banning it completely because we do get things like emergency blankets, emergency cots, even computer hardware as well, things that small agencies sometimes can't afford.
Chief Larry Kirk is the police chief in Old Monroe, Missouri, a department just a few miles from Ferguson. He is one of the few police chiefs in the country who actually opposes receiving military equipment.
My question right now is really if we should be having a lot of the militarized weapons that we're actually seeing now come through the program. Being realistic, there's no reason I'd ever need an MRAP. Most departments would never need one.
The MRAP that Chief Kirk mentions there is one of two armored vehicles that police departments receive by grant through the program. The other is the Bearcat, which, as you can see for yourself in this Bearcat promotional video, is quite the vehicle. So if you haven't figured it out yet, these vehicles are actually part of the Department of Defense program. They're old military vehicles from the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. Well, after the drawdown of those wars, the DoD looked at this equipment and said, hey, these things are worth $500,000 apiece. What do we do with them? Instead of throwing them away or selling them off, they simply grant them to police departments. A New York Times report says about 500 planes, helicopters, and mine-resistant armored vehicles have been obtained, alongside 94,000 machine guns. Immediately after the protests in Ferguson, much of the nation began calling for police departments to do away with military vehicles. But what the media has not helped the public to understand is that the real problem with militarization is not military equipment. It's the use by police of military tactics. A 7-year-old girl in Detroit, Ayanna Jones, was sleeping on the couch next to her grandmother when a SWAT team threw a flashbang through the window of her home. The flashbang, a stun grenade originally developed for wartime raids, immediately set fire to Ayanna's blanket. Seconds later, the SWAT team stormed through the door and, confused and deafened by the blinding effects of that flashbang, mistakenly shot that little girl through the neck, killing her. In Tucson, Arizona, a SWAT team attempted to serve a search warrant at an Iraq War veterans' home as part of a multi-house drug crackdown. Jose Guillen and his wife became alarmed when she saw a shadowy figure standing in the front yard holding a gun. Jose instructed his family to hide in the bedroom closet. He picked up his own gun, leaving the safety on, and stepped into the living room. Seconds later, he was dead. The SWAT team shot him 60 times. Police have still never said whether they found drugs. Atlanta, Georgia, a 19-month-old was asleep in his portable crib in the same room as his parents and 3 older sisters when police opened the door to the converted garage and threw the stun grenade in. It landed in the crib. The 19-month-old baby had a hole blown into his chest and suffered so many severe burns that he had to be placed in a medically induced coma. All of this because police were looking for a small amount of drugs they thought were in possession of the family's nephew. It's not just these cases. According to author Radley Balco, the most common use of SWAT teams today is to serve narcotics warrants, usually with forced, unannounced entry into the home. These increasingly frequent raids, 40,000 per year by one estimate, are needlessly subjecting nonviolent drug offenders, bystanders, and wrongly targeted civilians to the terror of having their homes invaded while they're sleeping, usually by teams of heavily armed paramilitary units dressed not as police officers, but as soldiers. Despite what the media spin doctors are going to tell you, militarization has nothing to do with the war on terror, and it has everything to do with perpetuating the war on drugs.
We've created so many wars for police officers to imagine. In other words, in the military, they have wars they go fight. Well, we've told our local law enforcement, you have wars in the street. We have a war on crime. We have a war on drugs. If you continue to tell people they're in a war, you're going to create warriors, and you're going to create soldiers that you're now putting on the street.
It's not just about tanks in the streets, although that is the most visceral and extreme example that we saw coming out of Ferguson.
To get a better understanding of the root of militarization, I traveled to Washington, D.C., and spoke to the ACLU director of the nation's capital. Because even though D.C. has military gear and plenty of military tactics, it does not participate in the 1033 program.
This would be surprising to anybody in a black community here in the city, which has been subjected to the militarized war on drugs.
Just because D.C. does not participate in the 1033 program does not mean that military tactics aren't used. In fact, they're used every day through something called jump-out cars.
The jump-out car is a form of policing which is only acceptable in black communities, in brown communities, and indigent communities. An unmarked car with between 4 and 6 police officers who are uniformed such that once they exit the vehicle, one can easily ascertain that they are actually officers. So they might be wearing black shirts and tactical vests, for example. And they're using essentially an ambush strategy. So they literally jump out of the car and surprise people. And the idea is to get people to submit to a consent search, a so-called consent search.
And see, this is the core issue surrounding militarization. Long before the 1033 program, long before Ferguson, Missouri, military tactics were being used on streets across America.
So in DuPont Circle, for example, which is a largely white community, and where we know that there is regular cocaine use and cocaine possession, you would never see jump-out cars jumping out on a group of white men in business suits and saying, hey, you fit the description of, regular cocaine users. That would be completely unacceptable.
And when you look at what goes on in Washington, D.C.
At this meeting, black residents in southeastern D.C. were able to express their frustration with militarized police.
I want to apologize for any poor behavior.
people who live in southeastern D.C. who say militarization for them is not about, again, the idea that so many of us have now been confronted with. Oh, that police use military tactics. People living in these neighborhoods say they've been dealing with it their entire lives, and they want to talk about how these tactics have been affecting them, not just for the last few months or even years, but really for decades.
Ferguson is not new. It may be new in terms of for the mass of people who watch it on media outlets. For those persons who live in inner city urban neighborhoods, that is a common tactic that is used.
Orlando Bego was a area who says that in the wake of Ferguson, the whole nation was watching the wrong problem. He agrees. Get rid of the 1033 program and nothing changes.
Nothing changes. The 1033 program deals with the equipment, the hardware, but the tactics are still there. And so whether or not you're rolling down a street in an urban neighborhood in a tank, or you rolling down the street in an unmarked police car, the purpose of the unmarked police car, as we talk about jump outs, is to bring a sense of fear to everyday citizens who may just be walking down the street minding their own business. This America was built on war. I have a son that's 10 years old. My son today says that he wants to be a police officer because he views the police as a person who serves and protects. He's into action figures, into superheroes. And I dread the day in which the perception that my son has for police officer changes. I dread the day where my son is pulled over for driving while black. I dread the day that my son is stopped and harassed because he makes eye contact. I dread the day that my son is stopped by police because he has a black backpack on his back. These things have to change.
So what you need to know is that, yes, Americans should be outraged at the idea of militarization, but not because police show up in tanks to a protest. You should be outraged at the idea that police for years have been using battering rams to knock down people's doors, throwing stun grenades through windows, all to serve drug warrants. You see, the militarized mindset isn't about gear, it's about tactics. So when we talk about things like no hesitation targets, where police are taught, shoot a child holding a gun, shoot a pregnant woman holding a gun, at what point do we as the public tell police, stop, we want you to hesitate? The problem with militarization has to do with training, not with every cop being bad. Look, at the end of the day, there are a lot of really good cops out there, men and women who really do want to help their communities and make them better places. But those men and women are being trained poorly. They're being taught to kill or be killed, that every suspect they encounter could be their last encounter, and that every person walking the streets of every community is a threat, when in fact, that's simply not true. Militarization takes good cops and teaches them to act like they're in a war zone. But the streets of the United States of America is not a war zone. And it's up to us, the public, to keep it that way.
BenSwan.com. Excuse me. Okay. BenSwan.com. Go to Truth and Media, the root of police militarization. You can watch that video, share that link, and that's really what it's coming down to. It's the training that police forces are given. We can't demand these cops need to be held accountable, but not address the fact that they're being trained to be this way. The corruption's being trained because the higher ups are corrupt. They got there because of their corruption, their willingness to shut their mouth and stick with the big guys, and it just breeds more corruption. So what we need to be calling for is a extremely specific training protocol that the public also agrees on. Not our representatives, not our local representatives, but the people. Like Ben Swan said, we want the police to hesitate. We don't want them just shooting and asking questions later, tasing and asking questions later. That's the problem. And I don't know about you, but I've seen these tactics used in Indiana by certain cities. Hence part of the reason that I just choose not to live in a city. If the city ever reached out towards me and tried to annex my area, I'd object to it, and if it didn't help, I'd move. Because I just see cities as being just a more corrupt system. I can't vote on a police chief. And unless there's something that's put into, a city vote where everybody can go out and vote for, a set of standards that the police must go by. Otherwise, they just shoot and then ask questions later. It's stupid. When they flashbang, people, which there was a case that I've talked about before on this program where they busted one person. That person supposedly gave up addresses. The person I talked to ended up getting raided. Flashbang and all. They busted holes in the walls. They broke everything in the place. And it was all... The warrant was for a potential meth lab. And the only thing found in the whole house was his wife had a roach in a little cellophane in her purse. And then they used scare tactics to get them to take a plea deal for that. And, drug classes and everything. The whole 9 yards. They got totally screwed over. And it's a case of not knowing your rights and being afraid, fearing people. You have to know your rights and you have to be able to stand up. And you can't rely on your lawyer to do that work. They are there to get you to take an easy route. And remember, they're part of a private organization, the Bar Association. They work for the Bar Association, not you. You're renting their services as an employee, basically, of the Bar Association. Unpaid employee. That's really what it comes down to. So you have to know your rights, because then if you're telling them this is exactly what I want you to do, that's what they have to do. Up to a point, they're not going to risk losing their license to practice. Phone line 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296. Feel free to call in. Discuss any raids that you've had locally, maybe the militarization of your local police, any corruption that you've seen. Go ahead, feel free to call in. Again, that's 718-717-8296. It seems to be just basically nationwide, but the most affected areas are, again, the cities. You know, look how many, employed officers there are in New York, and I understand New York is a big city, but still, everything's illegal, therefore there's a lot of criminals out there. For minorities and poverty areas, you're basically a suspect for being there, therefore they stop and frisk you. Think about that logic. Doesn't it kind of sound like soft eugenics? We won't kill them, we'll just harass and beat them and arrest them and imprison them, put them in cages. It's sad that our society has found this acceptable to allow it to get to this level. Look at how many people we imprison, put in cages for victimless, nonviolent crimes. And Jax in the chat said they would call him, but they have to go. So, but also made a comment, said that they flashbanged the expected meth lab. That was beyond stupid move. Meth labs explode real easy. And, I pointed that out to the person. I told them that why would they flashbang you if they suspected you of having a meth lab? And he said, I don't know, man. They just did. Because he was just in shock, He was basically, treated like a terrorist overseas, being raided by the military. With probably as many people or more than what they used to go after bin Laden, supposedly. And yeah, if it really was meth, which again just points to the fact that they were just allowing that person's false story to give them permission to go in another person's house. And it's in a poverty area. And no, this person wasn't black. This person was white. And the person works 2 jobs. Lost one of them over this incident because they posted their faces all over the local news. All over a roach and a cellophane in the wife's purse. And he's got drug classes over it. Because, again, they scared him. Because he just got basically raided by the military in a way. That is what local law enforcement has become. And that was within the city. And the thing that really got me is he's got to take drug classes, even though he has bad back problems, probably because he's been working 2 jobs trying to, improve his life. And he had been going to the doctor for the past 2 or 3 years because of these back problems. And then they tried back surgery, which didn't really help. But they were trying to find out what levels of medication would help him. And they were giving him drug tests every week, basically, to see where, make sure he was taking his medications the right way. And again, I don't believe in, pharmaceuticals and all this, but he did have legit back problems, and I'm sure that it's probably been egged on. Maybe they've done the wrong things and caused his back to get worse. But anyways, he had to take tests, and they tested for everything, even illegal drugs, to make sure he wasn't taking illegal stuff. And they kept close eyes on that, and he had all the paperwork for it. And he took a plea deal. Sad, but I've seen it happen to many people. I've seen people that are alcoholics, don't do any other drug. None. They get popped for a DUI, and then they have to take drug classes along with alcohol classes, separate classes. And then they get drug tested every week. And then there's been people I've seen that got a DUI or got a public intox, had to take alcohol classes, and then they gave them drug classes on top of it, and they were taking pharmaceuticals that they were prescribed, and because they didn't bring the paperwork the first time and they failed it because they didn't realize that they needed everything, and they told them that they went to the doctor and have medications, but they didn't bring the paperwork the first time, and second time they go in, if they don't have that paperwork again, they get violation. It's a money game. And when most of your prisons are privately owned, you start understanding when you can be used as slave labor. Screw minimum wage, we can get these guys in here working for 50 cents an hour, 25 cents an hour, 10 cents an hour. It don't matter. We'll do what we want. They're prisoners. They don't have rights anymore while they're in prison. And a lot of prisoners won't bring up the corruption because, one, the corruption plays both ways, because then they can get cigarettes and all that stuff, drugs and stuff smuggled in whenever they want. They tend to allow that corruption to exist for their own corruption to exist. In a way, it's kind of an anarchy thing, but it's a controlled anarchy thing where they're still used as slave labor. And it wouldn't be any more than a slave labor camp for a private company or something where they have a little tent city and people are fighting and killing each other over what little they have, what little they got. Because everything's always tense. You get an argument with someone, you're already angry, you're already pissed off, you're already miserable, and that turns into more violence. Why do you think they've created the false reality that we are a free society? To try to tame some of that violence. But when that veil gets lifted and you see what's behind the curtain and you see that, hold on, we're not in a free society. And it's the people that aren't affected yet that will clamor to that false reality. And that is what perpetuates the system. And it allows for this basic slave labor camps to be set up, privatized, and everybody's a criminal. Okay. Let's move on to something a little different. And This one's a little longer, but I'm going to go ahead and play it. And this is Stefan Molyneux, America in Decline, Prepare Yourself. And, you know, I see the turmoil, the false reality that we live free, but we have this police state that is truly in control right now because people have been blind to it. Enough people have been. We really have this economic problem that we've been told has been getting better, but the people aren't seeing it getting better. There are a lot of people that were, they're back to work all right. They worked for a big firm, made 50, 60, up to 100,000 a year, and now we're working part-time at Walmart. Great. The economy is getting better. People are back to work. I know a lot of the factories that are still left don't pay but maybe half of the wage that all the factories that are gone were paying. You know, the factories that still exist are the ones that started off a little late in the game, pay a 10 to 15 bucks an hour, and you're doing a job that employees used to get paid 30, 40 bucks an hour. And it was that false reality, that bubble in the economy, that Keynesian economics. And they're trying it again. They're trying to create a false bubble that says the economy is getting better. Great. People are back to work. Great. But it's not the same that it was before. People are not getting paid what they were before. They can't purchase. Why do you think Black Friday, was Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, and then even Sunday a lot of places. And then I'm still there, you sign up for email lists just to get deals or whatever. I'm still getting emails. It was Cyber Monday extended all week. And then it was Green Monday extended all week. I'm still getting, more deals. It's not the end of Black Friday yet, or, it's idiotic because people are finding better deals online, but they're still not buying as much. And I think that we're going to come to a head where we're going to see this stock market inflate to a point where then it's going to collapse again, and we're going to see, I believe, the Russians, Chinese, South America, Iran, and all these other countries take advantage. That's why they got the gas prices lowered. That's why they're holding off on raising them. They're trying to prevent Russia and China from collapsing the U.S. dollar. I believe that's what that comes down to. But, only time will tell. But I'm going to play this clip here. And I'll probably open the phone lines back up here after this. But this is Stefan Molyneux, Gerald Celente.
Hi, everybody. This is Stefan Molyneux from Free Domain Radio. Back for, I think it's round 3 or 4. I have Gerald Celente, who is the publisher of Trends Journal, which is an excellent resource for understanding one man's moral outrage and crusade for rational, ethical, and economic common sense. You can find it at trendsjournal.com. As always, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Okay, so about 2 years ago, I put out a video, which is, I think, rounding on at 800,000 views, which is there will be no economic recovery. And I've received a few slings and arrows of outrageous trollery with regards to where is this crash that everybody with any Austrian or libertarian common sense has been predicted lo these many months. Why do you think? I mean, according to some people, I'm thinking Doug Casey, this eye of the hurricane, that we're kind of in the middle of this pause between here and a vastly different place economically. What do you think has kept all of this at bay, and where do you think we are right now?
Well, I was one of those people as well that believed that it was going to crash out. I had absolutely no idea of what was going on behind the scenes, nor did anyone else. When you look at the schemes undreamed of, whoever heard of quantitative easing? We didn't know that they were going to do that and keep doing it. Who would have believed? Who would have believed that they have not raised interest rates since 2006? And they're effectively at zero. And when you go over to the UK, the European Union, you have negative interest rates. That's right. You got enough money to put in the bank? I think it's like over 500,000 pounds. We're going to charge you to keep the money in the bank 0.25% interest rates. Look what's going on over there in Japan. Abenomics. Hey, Abenomics didn't work the first round. I got an idea. Let's do another one. To the equivalent of the United States pumping in, when you compare their GDPs in ratio, at a rate of $3 trillion a year. Same in China. They just lowered interest rates, 40 basis points. They're all pumping in cheap dough into the system to keep it going. And it's unprecedented in modern history, and they just keep doing it, and it keeps the Ponzi scheme going. As long as Ponzi gets new players to come in, he could pay off the old ones with the new dough coming in. It's all this is. And that's what they're doing in front of everyone's eyes.
And for the average person in the street, I mean, I think most people are feeling, obviously, there's been a significant decay in take-home income. I just read today that the federal government is spending about $30,000 a year on the average household, which, of course, is hugely more than they can possibly afford. The price of everything is going up, with the exception, of course, of oil at the moment, which we can talk about in a few minutes. How do you think these, what's the best way for the average person to see the effects of all of these, at least to the man on the street, fairly esoteric economic policies?
Well, the two things they look at: how much less money they're making and how much more money that 1% is pulling in. If there was anything that Occupy Wall Street did, was show the world that the 1% is getting richer and everyone else is getting poorer. When you're looking at numbers, 85 people, that's right, 85 people in the world have as much dough as 3.5 billion, essentially half the world. So what all of this money pumping scheme and cheap money has done, when you look at the equity markets going up, why are they going up? Hey, how about all those merger and acquisition deals that are going on? Oh, that couldn't be it. No, just borrowing money for nothing and keep the Ponzi scheme going. Oh, it couldn't be because of companies borrowing money cheap, buying back their stock, and inflating the markets. So those are the two things to look at. You look at your personal wealth in decline, because here's the deal. Even if you're lucky enough to have what they used to call in the old days, when I was a young man, savings accounts, even if you had enough money to put into one, you're not getting anything back because interest rates are so low. So the only people it's helping are the ones that are helping themselves to all the low interest rate money. So it keeps the real estate scams going. Look, you look at mortgage rates, a 30-year rate. Yeah, it's back under 4%. And even at that, there's not a booming growth in the housing market. Yes, there is. There are growth areas throughout the world and throughout the country, but they're basically concentrated in high wealth areas. So if you're in New York City, yeah, welcome aboard. The money's flowing in from around the world. They're boosting the economy there in real estate, but go to other places that have never recovered from the real estate bust. So all of the money that's going in is going to the top. The facts are there. Median household income is below 1999 levels. You look at new home sales, the purchases of those, 40% of those used to be first-time home buyers. No more. That number's down to around 25%. Hey, how come? Well, because these kids are getting out of college with $80,000 in debt, $50,000, beginning their life's career like that. What are they going to buy? I'll tell you what they could buy. They could buy an automobile. How come? Well, step right up. No interest, no income verification. Don't have a job. Future stinks. Don't worry. Sign on the line and you'll zero interest rates for how long? So that's the scam that's going on. So the people in the real world know they're holding 1, 2, or 3 jobs, barely making ends meet, and you look at the job creation numbers. They're mostly low-paying jobs. So people know in their own lives, and then the lies come out of Wall Street that, hey, look at the markets. The equity markets around the world are booming. They're booming because of cheap money.
Now, there's always been, I think, historically a tension between Wall Street and Main Street. In the past, and this is obviously not a perfect, but a somewhat idealized, but I think economically sensible version of events. In the past, banks used to look for opportunities to invest, to create businesses, to help support businesses in their growth, and to create jobs. I mean, in the 90s, I was involved in a software startup. We took it all the way to a parent company, a company that bought us out, IPO. And along the way, having credit from financial institutions was helpful. You know, cash flow is king. You got to cover payroll and so on. And there used to be this idea that the manufacturing and the building of companies was like the pistons, and the financial institutions were like the lubricant. You know, to keep everything moving, keeping everything growing. It really feels to me that over the past sort of 15, maybe 17 years, there's been a real reorientation of the financial sector to thumbjiggery through financial instruments, through tens of trillions of dollars in derivatives exposure, through being economic geniuses by getting money from the Fed and depositing it at the Fed and making a quarter point or so. Has there, in your mind, been a disconnect between the role that the financial sector used to play in the creation and growth of jobs, and now it seems to be just a bunch of spreadsheets and old-style Genghis Khan pillaging of the middle class?
We're coming out with our top trends for 2015. One of them is called bankism. This isn't capitalism. Nomi Prinz, who I'm sure you know, writes a lot on banking, is the person that's penning it for us. And we came out with the term and the concept that this isn't capitalism anymore. It's bankism. 4 words killed capitalism, if anybody missed it. Too big to fail. Period, paragraph. It's not the old banking system anymore. Bill Slick Willie Clinton officially killed it with the end of the Glass-Steagall Act during his reign as president of the United States. It allowed the banks to become casinos that gamble. It took away the regulations that were put in place after the crash of 1929 so that another catastrophe of that magnitude could not happen again. And who was the clown, the little low-life boy that cleaned up with about $140 million after he pulled the deal off? Oh, you remember him, don't you? Robert Rubin. Robert Sellout Rubin. Yeah, the former head of the Goldman Sachs gang, U.S. Treasury Secretary, along with the other guy that followed him, Fat Mouth Summers, Larry Boy, the Harvard guy, gets everything wrong, makes a lot of money, and keeps blowing off his steam as though we're supposed to sweat from it. These are the people that destroy the country. It doesn't take a genius to figure this out. All it does is take looking at the facts. And the facts are a bunch of people that are a disgrace to this nation, that are traitors to everything that this country was founded upon, sold it out for their own greed. And they sold out. You could buy these clowns out with enough money anytime, any place. And it's not only in America, it's a worldwide. Whether you go to China, whether you go to Brazil, jump on a plane. It's what's happened with the immorality of the leadership around the world. It's destroying the world economies. The money is being concentrated in the hands of a few. The rest are details on how they do it. If you want to look at the details, you keep going back. The deregulation of the Glass-Steagall Act is only one. Robinson-Patman Act, Sherman Antitrust Act, Clayton Antitrust Act. Look, you even go to war without asking Congress. It's a complete bankism takeover.
Yeah, I mean, I have no particular problems with deregulation as long as people have to eat their own losses with Tabasco sauce. But, of course, that hasn't happened. The too big to fail banks are now like almost 40% bigger than they were before the crash. And for banks to grow during a crash is quite unprecedented. Now it seems, I don't know if you've read this lately, now it seems that they're trying to push their derivatives exposures onto the taxpayers' backs. So there's a bill that's trying to wend its way through to continue funding the government past December 11th, and the banking lobby is trying to insert something in it that allows them to buy and sell derivatives through subsidiaries that are backstopped by the FDIC, that have taxpayer-funded insurance for their deposits, which means basically, again, it's the same thing. If I win, I win. If I lose, I still win because I can get the government to prop us up. And that, to me, is horrendous. If you want to be in the free market, be in the free market. These guys seem to be just endless liquidity vampires on the soul of the nation.
It's not the government to prop us up. They are the government. Look who they are. You got a couple of front men out there, but when you look behind the scenes, it's all of them. And I mentioned Robert Rubin. How about that other cat who made the whole too big to fail thing a reality? Henry Paulson. And what's he doing now? Was he playing Frankenstein movies? You remember him, the Bush guy. It's one after another. Another Goldman Sachs man.
Give me a second, been having some problems here.
Be just endless liquidity vampires on the soul of the nation.
It's not the government to prop us up. They are the government. Look who they are. You got a couple of front men out there, but when you look behind the scenes, it's all of them. And I mentioned Robert Rubin. How about that other cat who made the whole too big to fail thing a reality? Henry Paulson. And what's he doing now? Was he playing Frankenstein movies? You remember him, the Bush guy. It's one after another. Another Goldman Sachs man. Who's running the ECB over there? Mario Draghi. Where's he from? Oh, he used to run the European division of the Goldman Sachs gang. Hey, who's running the one over there in the UK? Carney. You know what the word carny is? That's an abbreviation for a carnival man back in the day. A con man. Another Goldman Sachs guy. Look, it doesn't take, a genius to figure this out, man. It's 6 words have killed America. Harvard, Princeton, Yale, bullets, bombs, and banks. That's who they are. That's their business. When are people going to call a spade, a crook, and a traitor? They all have names. And they're a member of the Bloods and the Crips that the public likes to call the Republicans and the Democrats. They're both murderers and thieves. How many more people do they have to murder? Hey, any drone strikes today? You know, what country are we going to invade next? Any bombs away? How much more money do they have to steal? The entire system has been destroyed, continues to be destroyed by two-bit freaks that people still bow down to and roll out a red carpet for. And you got the names there in front of you. How could any self-respecting American look up to a McCain or a McConnell, a Lindsey Graham or a Nancy Pelosi, a low-life Reid or a little boy Ryan? And these are the people that are running their lives from Obama to the Clintons to the Bushes, and on and on and on.
How long do you think it will be before people wake up to the fact that war has effectively ceased to end? I think you pointed out way back in the day and took some considerable heat for it even before 9/11, that there was a huge challenge in the maintenance of peace. And then there was, of course, like the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand in 1914 launched a war that only lasted 4 years. And now, what are we in? 13 years, 14 years of the war on terror? Do you think people are going to wake up to the fact that we are now in this Orwellian nightmare world of eternal war, where it is simply just whack-a-mole? Whatever you get rid of or claim to get rid of is going to reappear in another form, a new bogeyman, a new provocative video. When are people going to get war-weary? Do you think it's because they're completely drugged by all the funny money that's funding this? Or where's our moral sense that things have gone completely awry?
What they do is they sell fear and hysteria. When people that don't have courage, dignity, and self-respect, they buy into it. And you have a nation in decline. How could they believe this stuff? ISIS. They make up another one. It couldn't be because the United States invades other countries. Let's put it like this. If you were an Iraqi, and let's pretend you're a Sunni, and you were thrown in jail after the United States occupation and tortured, and you're not alone. There are hundreds of thousands of you that they've done it to. They've destroyed your entire nation. They've killed over 1 million people. You have no future. You'd think you'd be angry. You'd think you'd want revenge. Hey, let's suppose you're one of those 6 people they just let out of Guantanamo and tortured you since 2001. You'd think you'd want to blow somebody's brains out in revenge for having been tortured for doing nothing, not even given a trial. As we used to say in the Bronx, payback's a bitch. Don't call it terrorism. Call it getting even and revenge. And the United States and its NATO allies keep spreading war and building hate and grounds for reprisal. How can you call anyone in Afghanistan that wants to blow the brains out of an American or somebody from NATO a militant? If an Afghani or an Iraqi were here trying to take over my country, I'd be first on line to blow their brains out, and they call me a patriot. It's a sickness of the psychopaths that keep leading us to war, that keep building the hate and the fear among the people. We're trying to make a change that's going to turn the country into a new direction. And on May 2nd of 2015, we're launching Occupy Peace. From the most historic four corners in the United States, right here in colonial Kingston, each stone building predates the Revolutionary War, the only intersection in the United States. Right across the street from me, the Kingston Courthouse. Kingston was the first capital of the United States. The Constitution for New York State was written right there. John Jay was a juror there. 90% of our Constitution was taken from that Constitution. Every one of the founding fathers, beginning with Washington, a real man, not like these little boys that play golf and drive pickup trucks and call themselves commanders-in-chief. This is a warrior that fought in battle. His farewell address, no foreign entanglements. Franklin, no foreign entanglements. Adams, no foreign entanglements. Madison, no foreign entanglements. Jefferson, no foreign entanglements. We are going to honor thy founding fathers. No foreign entanglements. And I don't want to get an email from some jerk saying, man, the world is a lot different now. Junior, grow up. The world was at war back then, too. And it was at war now. And as long as we keep spreading war, the prophecy of Albert Einstein is going to come true. I don't know how the Third World War will be fought, but the fourth will be fought with sticks and stones. So we're launching Occupy Peace, and unlike any other rally, we're going to have takeaways. And that means that we're going to put an action plan in place, a battle plan for peace, because I would rather fight for peace than die for war. And so what we're going to do is we're coming up with a whole number of strategies. People go on our website, occupypeace.us, and sign on, give us your concepts of what to do. This isn't about, peace and love. No. This is about stopping these psychopaths and sociopaths from destroying the greatness of this country, destroying the lives of innocent people, and rebuilding America.
It's hard for people to empathize with those who've been demonized as eternal enemies. But I always invite Americans to think of three things. Think of the Revolutionary War, think of Pearl Harbor, and think of the World Trade Centers and the Pentagon. And all of those aroused violent theories and actions of retribution. And the Revolutionary War was fought for ideological reasons, to be sure, but what was the trigger? A 3% tax on tea. What's happened to the Iraqis is infinitely worse than a 3% tax on tea, and the desire to throw off a foreign yoke and a foreign invasion when you compare a 3% tax on tea to 2 or 3 million people displaced, 1 million people murdered, infrastructure completely turned into molten lead and flames. If you look at the desire for retribution that came out of America after Pearl Harbor to the point where they dropped 2 nuclear weapons on largely civilian cities, that is the kind of retribution that even relatively minor attacks compared to what's happened from the U.S. overseas. The U.S. responsible by some estimates for 20 million plus deaths since the Second World War as a result of imperialism. We have far more in common with the victims of imperialism, since we are also those victims as taxpayers and draftees sometimes. We have far more in common with the victims of imperialism than we do with our leaders, and yet we somehow look at our leaders as part of us and the victims of their machinations as some otherworldly them. It's very hard for people to reach across the water conceptually and see that we tax livestock, we serfs, are all in the same boat being sailed off the edge of the world. Sorry, there's not even a question in that. I just wanted to rant on that particular topic.
No, it's true. Everything you said is true. They start the wars, we pay for them with our money and our lives. And to me, anybody that supports this supports murder. Call it what you want. I'll call it what I want. And the way I look at it is that anyone that supports this is an accomplice to murder.
All right. So I'm not sure that we have a more powerful topic to end the conversation with. I just want to make sure that people know Trends Journal is the place to go. And you just recently had, of course, an event which was predictions, which I assume part of what will come out in the next journal. If you can just remind people of the date and where they can register for Occupy Peace, I want to make sure people get that information.
Yes, first we're coming out with the new Trends Journal for the top trends of 2015. One of them, by the way, is going to be price wars, and it has to do a lot with the low oil prices. It's not only a supply issue, it's a demand issue. And when we were talking earlier about the world economy, demand is way down. That's why commodity prices beyond oil are down to 5-year lows, whether it's iron ore or corn or copper. You know, they're going down. The demand is down. So it's not only an oil issue. So we're coming out with our top 10 trends, how to profit and what's coming in the future, and also a video of our conference that we just had on December 6th, announcing those top trends and in detail what they are, what they're going to bring, what they mean, and how to profit from them and avoid the dangers. So that's available too at our website, trendsresearch.com, trendsresearch.com, and Occupy Peace. Sign up, give us your ideas. The rally will be held here in Kingston. We have permission to close down the streets of the colonial Kingston corners of John and Crown Street, and we're moving to rebuild America and bring this back to the land of opportunity it used to be.
Well, I certainly appreciate that. You have virtually single-handedly redeemed my faith in the moral vacuousness of the boomer generation, because you've always been a passionate advocate of peace and responsibility. And
Gerald Salente and Stefan Molyneux on YouTube. Get to a few of the points that are pointed out in this, and to start off, we'll talk about the whole war thing, this perpetual war that we are in against terrorism. That, you know, we can have a world war in 4 years, but look how long we've had this one now. Going on 14 years, or yeah. We I think are pretty blind as a society in whole to the fact of where we're at. And I think this also reflects the police state, the militarization of the police state. With this war going on that just will not end, we have that war mentality now. Society is getting to a point where violence is just a accepted thing. I think that's why it was easy for the agitators and the provocateurs out in Ferguson to spark so much violence. When you look at everything going on with society, where you have groups of people running around doing the knockout, you have people willing to run in and rob a place, groups of people. We're at war all the time. The police are at war with the people. That's why we need to do something. And you heard Gerald Salente talking about, excuse me, talking about his little campaign that he is trying to get going. Excuse me. You can go to Trends Journal. it's one of those things that we have to do something to change the mood in society where we see violence as acceptable. But it's hard to do when we're continually at war. And to touch on one other thing that was talked about was this whole left-right paradigm. Well, here from Drudge.com, Drudge Report, Republican Betrayal, Obamacare Fully Funded is the title on Drudge. You go to the article, it's at WashingtonPost.com. What's in the spending bill? We skim it so you don't have to. A copy of the fiscal 2014 spending bill is arranged for a photograph in Washington, and there's a picture here, and it's just humongous. The $1.01 trillion spending bill unveiled late Tuesday will keep most of the federal government funded through next September, and it's packed with hundreds of policy instructions known on Capitol Hill as riders that will upset or excite Democrats, Republicans, and various special interest groups. So what's in the bill? We sifted through the legislation, consulted supporting documents from Democrat and Republican aides, and called out some of the more notable and controversial elements below. Says here, please note this is a fluid report that will be updated to add more detail or correct errors. What notable changes did we miss? What notable changes did you spot? Contact us. First off, abortion. The bill once again bans using federal funding to perform most abortions, blocks the use of local and federal funding for abortions in the District of Columbia, and blocks the use of federal dollars for abortions for federal prisoners. Republicans say there is also new language directing the Secretary of Health and Human Services to ensure that consumers shopping for health care coverage on the federal exchange can tell whether a plan covers abortion services. Affordable Care Act. The law is still funded. Yay, Republicans. Yay. But there's no new money for it. There's also no new ACA-related funding for the Internal Revenue Service and Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the two agencies most responsible for implementing the law. The bill also would cut the budget of the Independent Payment Advisory Board, what Republicans have called the death panel, by $10 million. Afghanistan. Congress withholds funding for the Afghan government until certain conditions are met, including implementing the bilateral security agreement reached with the United States. Amtrak, the nation's rail passenger service, earns $1.39 billion, the same amount it currently receives. The rail service carries passengers through 46 states and hit an all-time high of 31.6 million passengers during the last fiscal year, according to Democrat aides. Campaign finance bill would dramatically expand the amount of money that wealthy political donors could inject into the national parties, drastically undercutting the 2002 landmark McCain Feingold campaign finance overhaul. Bottom line, a donor who gave the maximum $32.4 this year to the Democrat National Committee or Republican National Committee would be able to donate another $291,600 on top of that to the party's additional arms, a total of $324,000, 10 times the current limit. Centers for Disease Control Agency would get more than $6.9 billion, an increase of about $42.7 million. The nation's leading disease fighter also gets $30 million to help fight Ebola. Clean Water Act. In a win for Republicans, the spending bill blocks the Environmental Protection Agency from applying the law to certain farm ponds and irrigation ditches, a move that the GOP aide said would benefit farmers. Dodd-Frank. Democrats agreed to make some of the biggest changes yet to the 2010 financial regulatory reforms in a deal sought by Republicans. The bill would reverse Dodd-Frank requirements that banks push out of some of derivatives trading into separate entities not backed by the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Ever since being enacted, banks that have been pushing to reverse the change now that the rules would go back to the way they used to be. But in exchange, Democrats say they have secured more money for the enforcement budgets at the Commodity Futures Trading Commission and the Securities and Exchange Commission. Ebola, roughly $5.4 billion is provided across several agencies to combat the spread of the disease in the United States and around the world. The amount is less than the $6 billion Obama requested. Egypt. The beleaguered country gets $1.3 billion in military aid and $150 million in economic aid. But the money is subject to democracy and human rights conditions, while the Secretary of State can make exceptions for counterterrorism and border security operations. Embassies. There's $5.4 billion in security at U.S. embassies worldwide, $46 million more than Obama requested. The total includes new money to implement recommendations from the Benghazi Accountability Review Board. The bill also once again bans any embassy construction money to be spent on the lavish new U.S. Embassy in London. Environmental Protection Agency. The agency gets $8.1 billion, down $60 million from last fiscal year. The agency budget has been slashed by $2.2 billion, or 21%, since fiscal year 2010, according to GOP aides. The cuts mean that EPA will have to reduce its staffing to the lowest level since 1989. Eric Cantor, well, kind of. The former House Majority Leader stunned the political world by losing in a GOP primary last summer, but Congress agreed to provide $12.6 million for his signature legislation achievement, the Gabriel Miller Kids First Act, which authorizes new federally funded pediatric research. The bill was paid for by slashing federal funding for political conventions, federal worker pay, and conferences. The bill allows a 1% pay raise ordered by Obama to take effect in January, and the legacy of embarrassing spending scandals at federal agencies persist as Congress once again ban or put limits on certain conferences, official travel, and some employee awards. Food safety and the FDA. There's $2.89 billion for the Food and Drug Administration, a $37 million increase from last year. There's $27 million in new funding for the Food Safety Modernization Act. The Food Safety and Inspection Service would receive $1.16 billion, a $5 million increase. Guantanamo Bay, once again, the Obama administration is banned from transferring terrorism detainees to the United States from the U.S. military facility in Cuba. There is also a ban on building or buying any facility in the U.S. to house detainees, but the bill allows for the ongoing transfer of detainees to other countries. Heroin. In a modest attempt to address a growing crisis with the illicit drug, lawmakers are adding $7 million for a new anti-heroin task force run out of the Justice Department's COPS office. The money will be used as part of a competitive grant program for drug enforcement, including investigations and operations to stop the distribution or sell the drug, according to Democrats. Great. War on drugs is a failure. Let's fund it some more and make a whole nother task force. Immigration, the bill only funds the Department of Homeland Security, which oversees most immigration policies, until February, but negotiators gave new money for immigration programs at other federal agencies. There's $948 million for the Department of Health and Human Services Unaccompanied Children Program, an $80 million increase. The program provides health and education services to the young migrants. It's not migrants. They're not going back to Mexico, so they're immigrants. The department also gets $14 million to help school districts absorbing new immigrant students. Now they put immigrant. And the State Department would get $260 million to assist Central American countries from where of the immigrant children are coming. Internal Revenue Service, one of the GOP's favorite targets, will see its budget slashed by $345.6 million. The nation's tax agency also would be banned from targeting organizations seeking tax-exempt status based on their ideological beliefs. Israel, there's $30.1 billion in total aid from the country, including $175 million for successful Iron Dome missile defense system. Defense aid totals $619.8 million. Joe Biden, the legislation once again enacts a pay freeze for the vice president and senior political appointees. Libya, the troubled country, cannot receive any U.S. aid until the Secretary of State confirms the country is cooperating with the ongoing investigations into the September 2012 attack on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, Libya. Jordan, the Arab Kingdom, would receive $1 billion in economic and military aid in addition to U.S. Humanitarian aid for millions of Syrian refugees. Light bulbs, the bill once again prohibits new standards that would ban the use of cheaper, less energy-efficient incandescent bulbs. The proposal was first introduced and set into motion by the Bush administration, but the Obama White House allowed the change to continue despite sustained community demand for older bulbs. Marijuana, the District of Columbia will be prohibited from legalizing marijuana for the much of the coming year. The development of pending a voter-approved initiative shocked elected D.C. leaders, advocates for marijuana legalization, and civil liberties groups. The bill also would block the Justice Department from interfering with state-level medical marijuana measures and prohibits the drug DEA and from interfering with industrial hemp production. Metro Rail, the D.C. region subway and bus system, would earn $150 million in federal dollars for continued improvements. That's part of $10.9 billion set to be doled out for transit programs nationwide, including the construction of new rail and rapid bus projects in California, Colorado, Florida, Maryland, North Carolina, and Texas. But Republicans stress that the bill has no new federal funding for high-speed rail projects, especially the ambitious Los Angeles to San Francisco routes envisioned by California Democrats. And there's a lot more that they go over. And you just see where this money is going. And it's completely just idiotic. There's one in here for the United Nations. The perennial ban on providing money for the ongoing renovation of UN headquarters in New York remains in act. Whip-de-doo. U.S. Capitol and related agencies, there's $21 million to continue restoring the cast iron Capitol dome, and $348 million for the U.S. Capitol Police, which is a force of 1,775 officers. Some of this stuff. It's just, I just can't believe everything in here. It's nuts. We have, election season coming up and everything. Well, out of the AP, State Department holding back Hillary Clinton records. I got this from Drudge, too. Delays plague Hillary Clinton's State Department files. Washington AP, the State Department has failed to turn over government documents covering Hillary Rodham Clinton's tenure as Secretary of State. The Associated Press and others requested under U.S. Freedom of Information Act ahead of her presumptive presidential campaign. One AP request has sat since 2010 and the others date to mid-2013. The AP cited the public interest in gaining early access to the material. But the department denied all requests for speedy delivery under a provision in the law reserved for journalists seeking records on newsworthy topics. On Wednesday, the conservative political advocacy group Citizens United sued the department, alleging it failed under the group's FOIA request to provide flight records related to Clinton's overseas trips. That's all they got out of the AP right there. But we just seen the Duchess and the Prince and everything here in the U.S. and catching some of the morning shows, flipping through just to see all the propaganda. Of course, they were just worship the foreign royalty, and they were calling the Clintons American royalty. And they were calling the Obamas American royalty. LeBron James, he's American basketball king. They have a lot of the younger people, acting giddy. And I'm saying younger as in like 20. Giddy over this. And it's really sick. One problem we have with a lot of the, Prince and Princess cartoons that kids watch is we're not also teaching them the reality of what kings and queens are. The reality that history has shown. We're showing them this fantasy world, and they just clamor for it. Don't talk about, they have this false reality that they get a choice, not only because they're part of the EU now, but even the false reality, now we don't have a king or queen, so now we're not, if your country is in debt, the generations of kings and queens that stole the wealth from its own nation, collected it, crowns and jewels and hordes of all kinds of things, has the royalty ever gave any of that up? You know, most of their mansions and castles and everything are built off the backs of the people. Now, I'm not saying, you know, let's go. You guys should just run in there and take it all. No, I'm so past the, you know, get revenge type mentality that's a kind of immature mentality as I see it. That's something I thought of when I was young. Why don't we get revenge on these? No. Again, it's, you know, perpetuation of hatred and war and violence. There has to be a point that you take a stand and say no more. And that doesn't mean that I'm not for self-defense. You know, if someone is trying to hurt me, I will defend myself. And I trust that I'm capable enough in most circumstances to protect myself, but something can get you any day, and you never know what it'll be. Whether it be an ailment or, you know, a freak accident or someone out to get you. You really have to let go of that fear that, you know, there's something around every corner ready to hurt you, and not let it put you in this state of fear. You have to have it be an understanding that there's always a chance that you could get hurt. That you could die tomorrow. But there's a chance that you could live to you're 98, 110. You never know. I've seen people live a long life, and you wonder how they made it past 30 because of the life they lived. And then there's people I've seen that have lived a extremely, or at least attempted the best they could, live an extremely healthy and productive life and have died young. You never know. And then you have people that are healthy that live long, and people that are unhealthy and die young. And that you also have just freak accidents. So every day you're alive is a chance to make it a true change. And that's professing the notion of a true free society and saying no, it's not going to prevent the bad things from happening. What it does is it doesn't give a group of people some type of false authority over others to control their lives. If people can agree to the non-aggression principle, that you can be offended by something, but you don't have the right to abuse that person's right. Someone can say something. The best thing you can do is, well, if it's a lie, just outright, you know, shrug it off. You have the freedom of speech. You can provide facts that back up your belief. But we don't have a right to attack each other over our differences. And I think our differences give us a chance to become more intelligent people. Diversity is beautiful if you open your heart and your eyes and your mind to it. That doesn't mean you're going to agree with everything. You never have to agree with everything. You wouldn't be an independent person if you agreed with everything. I mean, you're just a sponge and you go along with anything you believe. But if you have a set of morals, if you have a set of beliefs, if you believe that people should be free, that people shouldn't abridge other people's rights, and people shouldn't be able to group up as a little small organization and run a society. That people should be free to be independent human beings without harming others. And under that gives everybody a chance to become the most intelligent people they can, to explore, to be creative. You don't have things going where, oh, this person's pretty creative with woodwork, but they're afraid to start a company because of everything you have to go through with this government organization that wants to exercise extortion and rob you of your money. And they will rob you of your money before you even get started. License, permit, license here. OSHA needs to come through. We need inspectors. We need paperwork here. We need you to sign here, go down here, report to this building at this time. You know, a lot of these people that might be extremely creative, they spend their time being those people. They're creating. They're not learning all the ins and outs. Well, you can go get a lawyer to start a business, and he'll help you through the process. But that costs money. More money. It's a system that gets to basically let in who they want. And we've seen government time again interfere with the private sector when someone's doing too good and we don't like what they profess. They'll be attacked. Organizations, Tea Party groups, or even companies. And the funny thing is, you know, look at Standard Oil, the Rockefellers. Well, we had the government step in and break that monopoly up. It got turned into multiple companies. Never mind that the reason Standard Oil was able to get as big as it did is because government corruption, lobbying, government corruption. Then when it got split up, it was a false reality because, well, guess who had stock in all these companies that came out of Standard Oil? Oh, the Rockefellers. Yeah. It was a manipulation of reality. And learning about the history, you better understand how they manipulate it. How they can tell the truth to a certain extent, but manipulate the reality of the truth. We broke up Standard Oil. Yes, you did. But you did not break up a monopoly when the owner of Standard Oil then owns the companies that come out of Standard Oil. It allowed those that were in control to stay in control and help prevent the ability for others to ever get that successful. And they successfully ascertained this final accomplishment when you read maybe something like The Creature from Jekyll Island and you understand the Federal Reserve. They ensured that the process would be corrupt. That's why it still is corrupt. And when more people realize what they did and understand it, you know, They understand this whole falsehood, this fallacy that we've been living in. And if there's one documentary that I would suggest to you when it comes to things like the Federal Reserve and taxes, and people behind it, I would urge you to watch America, Freedom to Fascism by Aaron Russo. And, you know, I've allowed people to watch my copy of it, and, you know, their minds are blown. They come back and they stumble over their words because it's all computing in their heads, and they just didn't understand to the extent that this went, that the extent of this fallacy that they created, and it is like someone breaking out of the Matrix. They completely have a different outlook on what's going on. And it doesn't explain everything that we're under, but it definitely awakes them to a point where they're researching this stuff. They want to be filled with more knowledge. That's one film that I've seen do so much success to leading to people just, you know, going, I need to understand more about the reality we're in, the legals, and, you know, what's truly going on. And there's times that, you know, things come out, we go, you know, look at this, you know, this guy discovered something, man. Well, you start looking into it, and, well, he says that it's this way, but I can't find anything to, you know, fill that, you know, understanding in. And it's one of those things that, you know, we've all been caught, you know, seeing something and immediately sharing it on social media. And I haven't done that for a long time. I really look into this stuff now, because there are informants, there's people working, and then people that are just, they believe the whole fallacy to the point that they'll go out there and they'll attack others that are trying to share truth. And they'll make fake videos or fake news stories to try to go, look, they're just crazy people. They believe anything. Well, not if you're doing your research. And when you're doing your research, you really find out that there are people that are behind this that have very sick motives. And a lot of the puppets, they just believe the propaganda and buy into the fallacy. When you have that, you just have willing subjects that will do the bidding of the elites. And there'll be a coming of two sides clashing eventually. If society doesn't make the change. Society has to make the change to the point that the government, the police, the military, they become the minority that can't push people around. And that also is preserving your right to self-defense. The reason the founders understood that the right to bear arms was something that they needed to put in the Bill of Rights was because that was one thing that they knew would be the only chance for securing freedom. Maybe the founders didn't get everything right, But for their time, they were revolutionaries. And for this time, be your own revolutionary. Thanks for tuning in, and stay tuned here on UCY.TV. The Continual Condition coming up next. Take care. See you Friday.
I'm